an absolute pleasure of mine to introduce you to this podcast and to see you and to be able to talk about your work and hear about your work. So Bethany Bell runs my Dialogue Dynamics. And I am really, really excited to hear all about that and also where it started, where it's going, what you want to do in the world. So did you want to tell us about CDD first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, it's a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about that. So thank you. So Canine Dialogue Dynamics, it's really, well, it began really about in 2020 when my perspective on how dogs can perceive the world and how intelligent dogs were, that started to really change. And I started to really come out of conventional training and just see things in a different way. And I started to realize that dogs understood far more than what we were previously understanding. And it stemmed from an understanding of a study I saw that came from Budapest, where they started to look at language and how dogs can understand language. So it started from that, but it also came from an understanding of kind of just taking a step out of conventional behaviorism and starting to just go into a more gentle approach, one that just really sees the dog as an individual. So it really does, I mean, it's in the name dialogue, so it really does center around dialogue. But I made it so it's dog centric as well. So it's all about the dog in front of us. It's about understanding them as an individual and just taking a step back from training everything. So, not looking at, okay, how can I train my dog to do what I want them to do? And instead understanding, what does my dog need from me? What can I do to improve my dog's life? What can I do to enhance their understanding of the world? So I started using language with my own dogs, and I was stunned to see that I didn't need to train it, and I didn't need to train everything I was doing with them. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. So they started to understand what I was saying in simple sentences, and I joined that together. And eventually, I formed the 5 phases of dialogue with that. So we went through a whole structure of, this is how we begin, with word association, then narration and things like that. So it starts with really communicating with your dog, but with communication, it's a two-way thing. So it's not just about me talking to my dogs; it's about me listening to their replies, just pausing, letting them communicate back, and really learning their own language and their own body language as individuals as well, and not just a kind of blanket thing about seeing dogs like, they do one thing and that means that all dogs mean this when they do that one thing. So it was learning how they respond to us as well in their own individual ways.
Wow, you blow me away. Um, it's we have spent so long as a species training dogs. And for you to actually come to that must be it has to be a soul-driven idea. It has to be your heart work because you've come up with something beautiful based on something very, very simple.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
sorry.
it's certainly something. I mean, it was kind of a formulation of all different life experiences really that led me there. I mean, my journey started as a force-free dog trainer. So I started in 2010 as a dog training assistant, and then I just started my business up in 2017, and I was just running lots of classes, doing all the kind of reward-driven stuff.
Mm.
And I was pretty happy doing that. That was I didn't see any issue with it until really I got my rescue dog. So I got my first rescue dog in 2015, my second rescue dog in 2016, and then my we got a foster dog that ended up being a very, very long-term foster dog because we just grew so attached to her. We got her in 2018, and she really changed my perspective on what what training allows. So she was a dog that was just like, I don't want to be trained. She came into my life, and it was like, I just thought, she came to me and she was like 3.5 months old. And in my trainer mind, I'm like, well, what problems can she have? Like, she's 3.5 months old. We'll just train everything. And so I genuinely just believed that all her problems I could just train away. And so she taught me that that wasn't the case, and that training sometimes just isn't enough, and that there were certain things that she needed beyond training. And so she taught me to understand her as an individual, and to really just stop seeing her, because she was a golden retriever, to as the easy training kind of dog that's just so food driven you can do anything with. She was not that. And so she was very much a strong personality, and I'm so thankful for that, because I needed to see, and I think we all to some degree have a dog that we can attribute our journey
Mm.
to, and they are the best teachers, and she really was. And so we got to a point where we were having some issues with our own in-house dogs, where there was just some infighting and things that I wasn't expecting to happen. And so conventional training and things like that just weren't really helping the situation. I'm reaching out to all these like professionals, like my colleagues, going, am I missing something? Like, what's happening? And they're
Mm.
all going, no, no, you're doing everything to a T. So I was like, okay, there has to be more to it. So that kind of made me look at other things. Then we got to lockdown, and I went from, fully fledged business, really busy, to just not being able to work. And so I had time to just think and just stop and breathe. And so it really did. And I always say it just started with a thread. It just started from me going, what happens if we just look at it this way? And then I pulled the thread and it kept going. And I went, oh, okay, some of my beliefs that I had are now being challenged. And I enjoyed the concept of being challenged, because I think that's the best way to learn, is to really just sit and think and go through the research and go through what we know. So that's really where it started from. And I started reading different books and learning about different learning styles. I learned a really good, I learned from a great book that was by Alfie Kohn, or Alfie Kohn, and he wrote a book called Punished by Rewards. And it was really just showing a different aspect, that even sometimes if we're still using treats in a controlling
Mm.
way, we can still be damaging the dog's mind, and we can still be compromising them. So that was a really big turning point. And then I was reading your books as well, 2018 to 2019, and bringing dog ethics into the question. And that really influenced my direction in how I view dogs as well. So there was like a combination of everything. And I never really set out to do this. It was just like, I discovered a different way of seeing dogs. And then it just built from there, and it turned into like a soul job. Like, as you said, it was something I had to do. And it's been
Mm.
a real pleasure to do it. And it's a very rewarding experience, particularly when people take it on and they're like, oh I can't believe my dog's doing this. I can't believe my dog's a different dog to the one I thought I had. So it has been a really rewarding process, really.
Yeah, it sounds amazing what you do. And did you find it hard to follow your heart?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I did at first, because it meant letting go of everything I thought I knew. And it was really scary, actually, especially at the start, because I had to kind of go, well, I've told all my clients these things. And actually, now I'm looking at the research, I don't think that's quite accurate. So I had to eat some humble pie a little bit, and take on this task where I'm like, okay, I'm going into the unknown now. People really at that time, and thankfully we're coming out of that time now, but at that time in early 2020, it was like, really the only kind of options you had were force-free training, or aversive training. And
Mm.
so that's kind of all people knew. And so I'm kind of coming and going, well, it's not really either of those things, although it can be paired with what I would now call relationship-based training. So it's not anti-training, but it's just where we take a step back and go, well, do we need to train that, or does a dog have to do that? Can we do this a different way, where it's actually a co-regulation experience? So we're not just going, I want my dog to do this. And I think that was the biggest challenge, that people coming to me going, yeah, but I want my dog to do that, and I want my dog to do this. And I'm like, but your dog isn't happy doing that. Your dog's
Mm.
not comfortable doing that. And actually the biggest and most important thing is the relationship, and the relationship that you're building. That's the first step before any training even should take place. And that was a hard thing, because I'm coming out from this like deeply entrenched training mind, where I'm like, yeah, but we're using rewards, so we get dogs to sit, we get dogs
Mm.
to lie down, we get dogs to do and perform
Mm.
for us. um But when I saw it instead of ethical training, which I thought that's what it was, and to an extent there were definitely ethical aspects to the training that I was doing, but it was more where I'm going, but if you replace training with the word performance, and everything kind of starts to look
Mm,
transactional. It was starting, and I looked back and I was like, yeah, I was transactional training, and getting dogs to just like perform, perform, perform. And it looked great. Yeah, it looks pretty. And I get why people love it. It looks really good. Like what I do now, it's not easy to capture on camera because it doesn't look a particular way.
mm,
It just looks like a normal relationship with a dog. It looks like a dog being a dog. Obedience is definitely a thing of the past. So it's like that's a
mm,
really hard message to come across. And also I think a lot of people, because I also help other professionals to get through this process as well. And I really resonate because a lot of them go, but I can't imagine doing anything without treats. And I'm like, well, you can use treats. I mean, it's just you don't have to.
mm,
Treats are fine, but when we don't use them in a way where it's like I'm kind of tempting my dog to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have done. So that was a scary aspect of it. Was like from the trainer that I had all my treat pockets, I had the treat pouches, I had all my rewards, to then go, I'm not taking anything. So that was a really hard part of the journey, definitely.
yeah, it's I would say, and I don't know if you think that they're similar, but I would say what you're actually doing is we put training onto dogs, didn't we, as a species? At some point we said, okay, the dog has to be trained. And what you're doing is you're taking that away again and saying, why?
Yeah,
Why not?
absolutely.
Why can the dog not just be considered? Why can't we allow them to teach us in the way that actually makes our lives better?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look into the history of dog training, like where it came from, really a military kind of based thing, which is totally understandable as to why a dog would need to be trained in that environment. But then we're putting it into our homes, and you're like, when you kind of it going in as a trainer, particularly like a newly budding trainer, like I was back in 2010, you don't tend to question those things. It's just the done thing. And so I didn't question it until I started to kind of go through this journey, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to apply the word why to everything. Okay, so we need to train this. Okay, but
Mm.
why? And so even just training a dog to sit, that really came out. That just went first because it's like, does a dog
Why?
need to sit? Why does a dog need to sit? And one of the really like interesting kind of revelations that I had was when I was training my long-term foster dog Joyce. She was a puppy, and I'm like, right, she needs to get used to everything. So we took her to
Mm.
cafes, and I wanted her to be the cafe dog. I wanted her to really, at the time, and I definitely don't hold this view now, but at the time as a trainer, you kind of want your dogs to represent how good your training skills are. So I was like, great, she's going to be a cafe dog, because my other two dogs would, I was just happy to leave them as they were. They were not cafe dogs. They've never been cafe dogs. And so I accepted that, went, okay, well, she's going to be my cafe dog. Anyway, so I took her to the cafes, and she struggled to settle. She struggled with certain aspects of that. So I was like, okay, well, we'll get the treats out, and I'll teach her to sit, and I'll get her bed out, and we'll teach her to lay down, and that'll be her settling. So we did that for a few months, and that was like the common thing that you did. That was what I taught in my
Mm.
classes, that like if you want your dog to settle, you start to condition them to it. Anyway, she a few months in, and she was doing it to the T, but every time I was moving my hand to take a drink or something, her eyes were looking at me. She was just glued to me, watching me, watching me. And if I wasn't giving her the treat quick enough, she'd bark. She'd get really frustrated. So I'm thinking, she doesn't seem settled. Like she was performing it. So she was doing it perfectly, staying in the position. But I could tell by her facial expressions and her eyes that she was not settled. She was just like, give me the next
Waiting.
week. And she was just, yeah. And
Yeah.
so that really, again, something she taught me was, why do we think that putting a dog in a certain position would make them feel settled? And that made me look deeper. Well, what is settled? It's feeling calm. But why do can we feel calm and settled and not be laying down? Like, what, we could be walking around and feel settled, we can be standing and feel settled. There doesn't need to be
Mm,
a specific position for it, which then made me look into all of that aspect of things. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, actually, if we get the dog to perform a behavior they're not actually feeling, how conflicting that must be for them internally. So that's
mm,
when I started to really just pull everything apart that I was doing and I had been taught. And so, teaching calmness has to come from relationship. It has to come from understanding why they're not calm and understanding what we can do to help them feel calm rather than perform what we think looks calm. And so
mm,
that was a huge thing, as why did we need to do this? And I think a lot of it did stem from military training, because we needed dogs in wars and things like that. And that was like over 100 years ago or thereabouts. And it just really just trickled into everyday life. And you kind of think, well, what were people doing before that? When they had dogs, what were people doing? And
mm,
it was so interesting to see that people just had dogs and people accepted normal dog behavior, and they didn't see everything a dog did as a behavioral problem.
mm.
And you start thinking, okay, well, that's not a behavior problem, that's just normal dog behavior, that's what they do. And so that it just changes the whole perspective of
Yeah.
everything you do. So it really did like drop a bomb on what I was doing, but it was fantastic because it was really exciting to learn a different perspective.
Absolutely. And not only learn it, but now you're also teaching it,
Yeah, yeah,
which is having a ripple effect. Every person you reach, every dog you reach is going to have a life that's natural and more, well, fairer to them. Because can you imagine being told when you have to sit down and when you have to lie down? Just that on its own feels so wrong. We do it to dogs, but if it happened to us, it would be completely disempowering.
absolutely. And I think this is where I know, there's a bit of a thing where we're kind of like, oh, we shouldn't compare dogs with humans. And they said, well, actually, there's a lot of benefit from doing that, as long as we are clear on understanding that they have their own differences as well. But when we look at brain structures, when we look at their understanding and how, and they have a prefrontal cortex, we have a prefrontal cortex, like there are so many similarities as well as so many differences. And as long as we're not putting emotions on, that they don't have, like we're going, oh, well, they're nasty or they're feeling vindictive. They're
Mm.
very they're very human emotions. They're very human.
Mm, yeah.
Like that's not. But when we can look at, okay, well, we know a dog can feel fear. We know a dog can feel, even jealousy to a point, because that's a protected resource. It's feeling insecure, and so we know they can feel insecure. We know that they can do all those things, and yet when we kind of want to put ourselves in that equation, we do have to take a look and go, how would I feel in that
Mm,
environment? And when we are helping dogs, because a lot of it is helping dogs through emotions and helping dogs through difficulties that they're facing, we tend to kind of train every single step. And when we look at how we work with people in therapy, and we look at how we would raise children through that, and to an extent we do that, but it's more outdated styles of doing it. So when we're kind of like, well, actually, if we just let the dog make choices, let's just introduce choice. And
mm,
that's a big thing. It was like, well, actually, what I thought I was doing, because I thought I was giving dogs choices, I wasn't. I was giving them kind of like a conditioned choice. It was like, you can either do this thing or you cannot do this thing. You can either have this thing you want or do this thing you don't want. And
mm,
that's not a real choice. So I started really looking at actually how empowering it is to give them organic, authentic choices in their life. And how would I feel if I just got told, well, you can't do that, you have to do that, you have to wait by the door for 5 minutes before we can open it, you have to perform a behavior. And it's like, well, I just replace things now where I get why people want their dogs to wait by the door. It's a safety thing, but you don't have to get your dog to go into a rigid down or a rigid sit. You can just ask, oh, would you mind just waiting a second? I say, well, just wait here a minute. I'm going to open the door now. Look, can you back up a little bit? Because look, it's going to, just so it doesn't hit them. So it just teaching them a little bit of body awareness, a bit of spatial awareness, and they enjoy the process because they really enjoy being part of what we do. They love
mm,
being part of what we do. So instead of everything have to going into these kind of rigid rules. It's actually, well, how can you make your dog, part of your life so that they feel included in what you're doing? So they don't feel that in order to get attention, they have to perform a set of behaviors. In order to get anything they want, they have to perform something. And it's like, no,
mm,
actually, why do they need to? It doesn't, it's a very human thing.
mm.
That's not natural dog behavior at all. So it was a really interesting perspective change when it's like, yeah, does a dog need to do it that way though? Like, we can still get to the same conclusion with safety, but safety is very it can be done it doesn't have to be done in such a rigid way, because safety can still be achieved. Safety is achieved through strong relationships, strong understanding of the world around them. It doesn't need to be done by a set of cues and a set of like performance things. So that was a really interesting way of changing it.
Absolutely. And do you find, because what hit me then when you were talking is the pressure that we put on ourselves to have a dog who does the things that a good dog should do. And you and I don't do that. And more and more people are, more and more dog professionals are not doing that and embracing the opposite. We don't have to have these strictly trained dogs. We'd rather have a free dog, but I think you can still see it in people. You see it in people that are walking their dogs. The social fear that their dog is going to make them isolated, so they must make their dog be good. Um, and I think your work and my work is, it's not about making the dog look good, it's about making the dog feel valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely be spot on, because there's so much social pressure in kind of canine culture, and it kind of like developed and developed over time, where it was like becoming more and more socially unacceptable for dogs to just be dogs.
Mm,
And I think partly because dogs do conform, to how we train them. They are easy to get to conform. So I think because we found that easy, that became the norm. And actually, just because it's easy to do doesn't always mean it's the right thing to do. And when we looked and I was looking at, working with clients, working with other professionals, it does take the pressure off of us. That was the first thing I noticed, but it takes the pressure off the dogs as well. And
mm,
that's another thing. And I think when you start to really see the dog and you see beyond the trained behavior, you can see the emotions behind that. You can see it in their
mm,
eyes, you can see it in the way they hold
mm,
themselves. um, and so that was a huge part of it. Is actually most the dog parents that I train, they don't want to be doing this. They don't want to feel that they have to take all this stuff out. They come to me, they're stressed. They're like, okay, I can't get my timings right. I'm taking all these treats out. I've got like 3 different types of reward-based treats, because this is for low rewards, this is for high rewards. And they're just so overwhelmed. They're so overwhelmed. And then because they're overwhelmed and they're doing this, it's like their dogs are overwhelmed as well. uh,
mm,
and actually, it's just normalizing dog behavior. Like barking is seen as totally unacceptable behavior. It's like immediately if a dog barks, it means they're either over aroused or they're stressed. And yeah, they certainly can be, absolutely, but it doesn't mean they always are. I've worked with many dogs that are just really vocal and they are so happy. Like they're just like barking like, oh, this is great, that's great. It's like having a hyperactive child that's like doesn't stop talking, because they're just so like everything's, they feel
engage.
everything so much, and they're just like, oh my goodness, that's amazing, that's great. And they're like, mum, did you see that, did you see that, look over there. And we get dogs like that, and it's like, I don't really want to shut those dogs up. I'm like, no, embrace that, because that is beautiful. Like that is so beautiful. I'd actually rather, and I find it easier when dogs are very vocal and they are very expressive, because they're not hiding anything. They're not
Mm,
suppressed. They're not feeling so
mm,
insecure that they can't communicate with us. Quite often, the very vocal dogs are the dogs that actually at least feel comfortable with the people they're with, where they will express themselves.
mm,
It's the dogs that are tiptoeing and they're like, I don't know, should I say that, I'm feeling this but I don't know. Then you can start to see this shutdown behavior, and you're like, that in society is seen as a very good dog because the dog's not barking.
mm,
And it's like, that we may perceive that as good, but that is actually a very unhappy dog. That's a dog
Yeah.
that's really struggling and, pushing everything in. And like eventually, as we know, that will lead to an explosive behavior. And then that kind of looks like it came out the blue, but it's like it didn't. There was a big build up to this. Um,
Mm,
and so it's this kind of misconception of having the good dog. And in fact, I just released a podcast about the perfect dog, the myth of the perfect dog, because I felt that pressure as a trainer coming into the industry, that I had to train everything that my dogs did. And I actually was in a bit of denial. I didn't like training my dogs. I didn't like it. I
no.
just, and so, part of the whole thing was that, your dogs should behave this way and they should behave that way. Now, I had two spaniels at the time, when I first, started my business. And every time I came through the door, they're like jumping all over me. They're like, oh, hi, mum, hi, mum. And they're like flooring me. And I was like, as a trainer, I shouldn't be allowing this, but
Yeah.
I love that. I
I
want
love
my
that.
dogs all over me. I don't want my dogs to like, I come in and they're like, hi, I
Yeah.
don't want them to be like, I'll sit and I'll wait and I'll hold it all in. I'm like, no, it's beautiful to see them express themselves. Now, they do know the difference between doing that to me and a guest. I understand that we wouldn't want them to do it to guests, perhaps. I mean, but we don't have to be strict with it. They do understand. They're perfectly capable of going, okay, well, mum loves this. That's great. But, maybe we'll just be a little bit more careful with other people. And that was really easy for them to understand. I didn't need to train any of that. I didn't need to correct anything. I just guided them. I just said, "Oh, should we go a little bit careful, or maybe we'll come away." And to be fair, I don't really have many people around that don't like dogs, so that doesn't really happen. But I started to feel at the time pressure and guilt for not
Mm,
wanting to train those behaviors away. I didn't really want it. And, the whole thing that it was, when social media started to erupt into like getting more video, because it used to be very much more just pictures.
mm,
And then it was like, no, you've got to put videos out all the time. So you feel that kind of pressure that you have to film what your dogs are doing or what you're getting other dogs to do.
mm,
And all of it was like, you saw videos of like the perfect heel work, beautiful. Like you kind of look at it and you're like, oh, it's seen as beautiful. And I do get that. I get why it looks good and I get why we think it looks good. But I didn't want my dogs to walk like that. I didn't want them to walk and be glued to my side. I just want to go for a normal walk, and be comfortable. They're comfortable in the harness. I'm comfortable. Like I don't have my arms being pulled off. And we did, have issues with pulling with spaniels, but I didn't need to really train anything. We did try training as a trainer. I tried, and it's like, okay, yeah, we can get so far, and then it's like they just erupt back into their normal behavior because that's who they are. And instead of trying to make them 90% of the time lead walking dogs, I didn't. I removed the lead and we just went to different environments where they didn't have to go on the lead. And so it was looking at just changing things. But that when I started kind of coming taking a step back from that training world where it was like everything has to be trained, the pressure melted away and my dogs changed as well, because I just was like, well, finally I can just enjoy them and not feel guilty for enjoying them for who they are.
mm.
And so yeah, there was no pressure felt from me anymore. There was no pressure felt from them anymore. And I see that pressure melting away with the professionals I work with, and also the dog guardians too.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? And
Oh, of
this is
course.
something I have been musing over for a long time. And I think you're the perfect person to ask. And it is every dog that I've had has been very expressive, lots of barking. I've got Darcy at the moment, lots of barking. And then I see people with family dogs or dogs, people walking their dogs. And it started to come into my mind because their dogs seem to be no trouble. And my dogs seem to be a bit wild, and I love them wild, and I wouldn't want them any other way. I wonder what these dogs that just comply with their people's life, I wonder whether they are in an element of shutdown. They are generally relaxed dogs. Um, and what the percentage might be.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's so many different elements. Obviously, we look at personality, and some dogs are just naturally like a bit more reserved. I mean, as much as my two dogs are very, very expressive, when I compare them to each other, Steve is much more of a reserved dog than Dave is. And there were obviously background and things like that. The backgrounds they came from will have influenced that and shaped personality to a degree. But also, he is just a bit more of a naturally reserved dog in the sense that he's more polite, if we want to see it in that way, where he's like, if he wants something, he'll just like be very subtle about
In
kind of he'll look at something and kind of keep looking at it if he wants something, or he'll tap his paw on me and kind of just give just a gentle tap if I've not seen him. Whereas Dave, he's like my little clown dog. He's a bulldozer. He's just like, I want something, mom, and I'm gonna like knock it over, and I'm gonna like rattle something, and I'm gonna bark at you. And he does his little play growls that he does, so he growl communicates. And people like think, again, it was another misconception about the growl being immediately a bad thing. I know he actually growls because it is a part of his communication, and I love it. It's so funny. But when we look at through heavy conditioning, how we make dogs conform, even in ways that we do believe to be ethical. So if we're training everything and we're using rewards, and we're getting dogs to comply through the use of rewards, I do think there's going to be quite a high percentage of dogs who favor that performance to get the reward over their true innate natural behaviors, wants and
mm,
needs. And it is very, very doable, and I see it all the time where dogs will kind of go, well, I feel this way, but I'm being conditioned. They don't knowingly know they're being conditioned, but that is what's happening.
mm,
And so they will perform. They become performers where they were never meant to be. And so yeah, they're like what we would perceive as good, but they're holding it all in, just holding it
mm,
all in. And they're
mm,
like, I'm doing this because if I do this, I get the treat at the end, or I get the toy at the end, or I get whatever at the end. And so and also further on the other side of that, obviously we get compliance as well through aversives and punishment and fear and all that kind of stuff,
mm,
which further shuts them down. But then when we're looking at just kind of taking that step away from conditioning everything. Now, conditioning, as we know, is a natural thing. I mean, it happens all the time. But when we just extract conditioning and we put it into the dogs every single thing they do, that actually affects their own ability to think for themselves. So when we're actually looking at
mm,
what parts of the brain we're working with, and when we look at just keeping them stuck into this cycle of perform, do this, and receive that. So I do that, I get this, I do that, I get this. That really limits their ability to think. And when their ability to think is limited, they can't think for themselves. They can't make their own
mm,
decisions. They are just becoming robotic. And so we can do that again through the use of treats, or we can do that through the use of force. But the effect is essentially the
mm,
same. We get an unthinking dog who just everything becomes very transactional. Um, and so I think that there's a high percentage because the world only knows training through rewards or training through
mm,
punishment. There doesn't seem to be a well-known in between, which is what I'm trying to do, what you're trying to do. And hopefully the world will get more and more exposure to that, and changing the perspective of what a good dog is. Because, what is that? It's like
mm,
if we actually said what that was, I don't know, everyone would say something different. So the dogs that are less expressive, and kind of more performance based, I don't think they're necessarily happier dogs. I
mm,
think I understand it from the human perspective. They're easier. They certainly can be easier, but only for a period of time, because they're not easy when they suddenly can't perform a behavior, or when they suddenly can't hold the emotions in, and then you see this big behavior explosion where you're like, well, that's out of character. I've never seen my dog.
mm,
Where did that come from? Now that I find I would experience that as much harder than seeing a dog, that like your dogs, like my dogs, where they're really expressive, and I know them because they're expressive. Now I think the interesting part to that is that when you actually remove training for at least the majority of the time, and we use it for areas where we may need it or want it. And some dogs do enjoy training, absolutely. Some people do enjoy training, definitely. And if it's done in a relationship based way, then there's no problem. But actually through what I do with the CDD method is it is its standalone thing as well, so it can be paired with it, but it's also standalone. You don't need training for it. When you see dogs that have not been trained so much to everything they do, we can learn so much better from them
Mm,
because they are not performing, so they're not sheltered within this mask that we've taught them to wear. So they are
mm,
now actually, when they want something, when they need something, we know it because we're learning actually their true behavior, not a performed behavior, not a
mm,
behavior we've trained. We're looking at their real behavior. And I think if we looked at a percentage, I'd say that I can't give a precise percentage on that, but I'd say it's a high percentage to the dogs that have are a little bit more shut down, to the dogs
mm,
a little bit more free and expressive. I'd say that the ratio is quite out, and hopefully we can change that. But yeah, I'd say that because people don't know anything else, so it's hard, and it's just the
mm.
done thing.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's almost like the social pressure that we put onto ourselves because, and now I'm going another layer in. Um, our dogs are noisy, bad. I don't know if you can hear her shouting at me down there. Other people's dogs who've never had any training fit in, do the thing. And I used to say, why are my dogs like this? I used to say that because I was a professional dog trainer for a long time. Um, and now I say, why are their dogs like that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love where you're coming from in that perspective because, yeah, and it's a lot of it is the expectation, and I think to a degree, social media hasn't helped because people. So I've kind of come from, when I compare what dog life was like when I first started coming into it. I was quite young. I was 18. So in 2010, I'm coming into the kind of training environment. But most people in a dog park, they were just kind of more relaxed, and
Mm,
kind of a bit. There was a bit more, even in 2010, a little bit more like, well, dogs are dogs. They'll be dogs. Um, then come to sort of social media expanding, and then everything, all the groups forming. And I think what happened was, and I see it in so many groups, is everyone, like, people take pictures of you. If your dog does something wrong, if you do something wrong, your picture's up, your picture's in a
mm,
group, and it's all over social media. And so people are scared that, well, if my dog puts a foot out of line, my picture's going to be up in the local group, and I'm going to be lynched. And I think people get very, very worried about that, and I understand that. So people are scared. That's not the only reason, but I think that's partly the reason, is that people are worried about that social pressure, that judgment, or people
mm,
becoming less tolerant in life as well. So people are coming up and go, your dog barked at my dog, your dog shouldn't be doing this. And yeah, absolutely, there are some occasions where people are irresponsible and people don't help the situation. So I think there's a lot of social pressure of how a dog should be. And that puts so much pressure on us, where we then become so much more controlling. Because when we look at being controlling, where that stems from, a lot of it's fear based. A lot of
mm.
it,
Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
reason why we become so micromanaging and controlling, is because we're so scared that, well, if we don't control our dog in that, they're gonna do something bad, they're gonna do something dangerous, they're gonna do something socially unacceptable. And so it is, when we see the difference between the dogs that, my dogs will bark, they've always barked when, the postman comes or someone walks past the house. That's deemed socially inappropriate. I actually think it's a good thing. I kind of like my dogs notify me if someone's around. I think
Mm,
that, to me, that's just a helpful thing. But the difference is, I'll just say, oh, that's great, thank you for letting me know. That's just the postman. And they go, oh, okay, there's nothing to worry about. And then they'll settle down. So it doesn't escalate into mania, where they're now panicked and worried.
mm,
But even if they were, the barking isn't the problem. It's the fact that they're feeling panic. That's the problem. That's the area
mm,
where I want to work with and comfort my dogs and help them through that. um, but I think when we look at the difference between, like, when people go into cafes and they do take some dogs that are quite happy going in cafes, some dogs aren't. But if a dog so much barks at anything and they go, oh, something made me jump, or there was a bark, everyone sort of turns and looks and goes, why did you let your dog do that? But if we see people taking their children in, well, everything the children do in those situations is perfectly acceptable. But we don't
yeah.
we don't have that same compassion for dogs in that situation. And so obviously there's a lot of pressure, because it's hard enough in society as it is, but now we've got this another being with us who sometimes might be a bit unpredictable. They might sometimes bark at something, they might sometimes show an interest in something, they
Mm,
might be a bit noisy, and so we're so worried that what's that going to make me look like? And so, yeah, as professionals as well, of course, we get really worried because we get that expert. I certainly did that. I had to have the perfect dog. I had to have the rescue dogs that
mm,
come in, and I made them into something completely different. I kind of churned out these rescue dogs into like the perfect dog,
mm,
and they were perfectly trained, and that obviously didn't happen, because they were like, well, I don't want to be trained. I'm happy where I am. I'm loved. I'm in a nice environment. I'm understood. That those were the things that really mattered. And so I think that there is, when you look at these dogs that are really calm, I think even without training, that an element of them can just be quite shut down, because maybe they're
mm,
being misunderstood, maybe they're being ignored if they're expressing themselves, because that's another element of it, is
mm,
that a kind of phrase that I used to use and I was taught was reward the good, ignore the bad. And when you really look at that, like really look underneath, what does that mean? What does it mean to do that? Because if we're ignoring the bad, well, what are we perceiving as bad? We're
mm.
perceiving a dog that's expressing themselves as bad. And so if we continue to ignore a dog expressing themselves, they're going to stop expressing themselves, and they're just going to like become quite reserved. So I think there's elements of all of those things, definitely.
Yeah, it's you just reminded me of a little dog that I saw at the beach, and it was a couple walking along and a little dog walking along behind, and the dog stopped and looked up, and they carried on walking, and he just dropped his head and carried on walking, and we see that every day, don't we? We see that kind of thing every day. How do you stay optimistic when you see that kind of thing?
It's hard. I think it's been quite challenging this year, because I mean we've moved around quite a lot, and I do think different areas, you see different things in different areas. I think you
Mm,
get certain areas where okay, there's good dog professionals in this area, they're influencing it, and it's not so bad. I've certainly come to an area where, well, I've moved back into Surrey, and it's a fast-paced, busy area, and so I see not just that, but I see I've seen dogs wearing e-collars and slip leads and things like that, and these were things that I didn't actually see that much before. So it's on the rise, and I see people getting frustrated with their dogs or ignoring their dogs when and I see that's a perfect communication moment. Like the dog
mm,
today, that's a perfect communication moment. That's what we should be prioritizing. And then the dog's ignored, and you just it is very, very hard. The only thing that really keeps me optimistic is that if we keep spreading the message, and that I try not to attach any judgment to the people that do that, because I think there are reasons why they're like that. There are reasons
mm,
they're scared, they're frustrated, they don't know anything else. And if we just keep pushing our message, I do think that we will have an influence. And I really look at the small influences that I already have made, and I focus on that, and I'm like, well, that can be the bigger picture. That can be the bigger picture, because it has to be, because we can't continue to treat dogs the way that we do. And it's been going on for so long now, when I compare my thinking as an 18-year-old girl coming into the industry going, great, in 5 years it won't be like this, it's going to be all great and everyone's going to treat their dogs well. And of course, I'm 33 now, and I'm like, okay, I can see that actually, to some extent, the problem may have even worsened. So I think if we just keep getting that message across, if we keep helping each individual dog, focus on the dogs that we do help, and really think about that, and then have that vision, because you have to have a vision. Um,
mm.
and I certainly know what my vision is, and so I keep my eye on that and go, well, the vision is that we're not going to see that hardly at all. It would be perfect if we're never going to see that, but at
mm,
least that would be a rarity to come across those situations. And because one of part of the thing that I teach in CDD method is when your dog does look at you, when your dog does express something, celebrate it. Just, oh, that's great. What can you show me?
mm,
Like I do it with my dogs all the time. They'll do something silly, like Dave. He likes to like pick up something. He thinks he's a retriever when he's not. So I come in the house, he'll go and pick up a sock or a bra or a bit of cardboard or a bit of rubbish, and he's parading it around. And I just go, wow, what have you got? What have you shown me? That's amazing. Can you come and show me then? Let's see it then. And it's like that is such a tiny, simple thing to do, but it means the world to him. It means the world.
mm,
Like you can see him, he's got a sprint in his step. He's like so proud. He's so happy about this tiny thing he's done. And so making those things, just making them feel part of it. And so when we're outside and a dog, when I'm working with dogs and it's like the dogs look into their person, it's like, okay, what did that look mean? So acknowledge it. So are you okay? Is it reassurance that they need? Is it just that they've done something and they're really like happy, or do they want to show you something? And one of the things that I like to teach is being part of your dog's walk, being like not just walking a dog but actually being part of it. So when your dog is spending 5 minutes sniffing and you're getting a bit bored, why not talk to them about it? Ask them, what have you found? What did you find? Was that really good? Does that smell good? And just get a bit interested in what they're interested in. I know we're not actually going to be interested in what they're smelling, but we're being part of their walk, being part of their
mm,
world. And actually from doing that, recall gets better because they're not just like, oh, well, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, because you become one, you're together,
mm,
you're synchronized. And so you're asking your dog, like, what did you find? What did you see over there? Shall we go around that corner and see what's around there? And so you start to just become more engaging. So I help to highlight those moments where the dog looks at them, and because they're looking for something. Are they looking, and it's like, well,
mm,
what are they, do they need reassurance? Do they need sell? What are they just like, mum, this is great? So it's really trying to get that message across, because I think that is top
mm,
priority over anything.
mm,
Obviously safety and everything comes first, and but in terms of what we're teaching, in terms of the relationship, in terms of training, that's an untrained thing, and that's something organically grown. And so the thing that keeps me optimistic is keeping my eye on that, and getting that message across, because people love doing it when they might feel a little bit silly at first, but you get used to it. And it's something that you just find is so heartwarming when you see how that
mm,
affects the dog. Yeah, you want to do it more and more.
mm. And you as well, it affects you because you get to slow down on this fast-paced life. Your nervous system slows. You get to notice every little thing that your dog does, every little communication, all of the preciousness about living with this other species. You get to be with all of that, and you can either choose that and have all of that, or ignore that and miss out on all of that.
Absolutely. And
Mm,
that was a big learning curve for me. It was like just embracing the fact that when you work with your dog together and you're synchronized, and again, co-regulation is if our nervous system is calm, that helps their nervous system to calm.
mm,
There that is very much a synchronized thing. That's what co-regulation is. And so it's like when we work with that and we see our actual dog for who they are, that is, I can't put it into words how much more precious that is than
mm,
having the really well trained obedient dog. Like that, it's in, you can't compare the two. So seeing the dog in the way where you actually see them for who they actually are, it does remove the pressure, and it replaces pressure with pure joy. I
mm,
would going through this journey, I would never want a trained dog. I don't want a trained dog at all. I want a dog that's
mm,
like, oh, that's great, let's go and do this, or what do you think, mum? Or just a thinking free dog, a
mm,
dog that knows themselves, and a dog that knows me and I know them. um there isn't really anything you can replace that with. And so
mm,
we do miss out when, instead of looking for those little moments where we're like, oh, my dog noticed that, my dog understood what I said, I understood what my dog said, those little tiny, like they may seem small, but they're massive. if we when we look at that, instead of just like, okay, my dog performed, that's it, in like 0.1 seconds. Oh, my dog came
mm,
back to me the second I called them. My dog walked and glued to me and looked at me the entire walk, and they didn't look at anything else. Those things just, they just don't compare. You miss out on so much, and
mm,
so does the dog, because the dog should be looking at their environment. They learn better when they're actually involved in their environment.
mm.
Yeah, I can't compare it, and it's just you miss out, and your dog misses out when you don't focus on those things, definitely.
Yeah. What right have we got to take that, because we're taking their life away from them, and that is what they have. They have their life, and we create these conditions that they live it in, and we're stealing their time and we're stealing their life. We're also stealing ourselves of what we can really get and learn and be with when we have a dog. So yeah, I think you and we tried to fit into a round hole of square pegs for a while, and then we decided that wasn't for us.
Absolutely, I couldn't put it
Uh,
myself, honestly. That, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, wonderful. There was something else I was going to ask you. So you have an online course, and do you work with professionals and with guardians?
Yeah. So, in terms of, I have a few courses. I have one. My biggest course is, at the moment, is probably the reactivity course. It's called Redefining Reactivity, because it's really understanding from a very different perspective of what reactivity actually is,
Yeah.
and how we can work with dogs differently using the CDD method. Because what I do is I actually work with them through dialogue, through relationship. We don't use training at all for
Mm,
activity. Like, we don't get the dogs to do anything. We work with the dog that in front of us, and we teach them how to take control of their life. Like, we're not controlling them anymore.
mm,
We're teaching them how to have more control within themselves, with self-regulation and things like that. So I have an online course for that, with videos of me actually using it with my own dogs and some of my clients' dogs as well, because Steve always struggled with reactivity, and training, it never really got us anywhere. It just, certain degrees of suppression, but it never really broke through on an emotional level. So I showcase the differences and go from start to where we are at in our journey, and showing all the things there. So I've got a course for that, for kind of more behavior stuff as well. I've got the behavior course, and just life stuff as well. So like things for puppies, adolescents, adults, senior dogs, just how people can learn to communicate with them. And I've got a new course at the moment that I'm building. So it's a mentorship at the moment, and then that will turn into a course. And that's for people that want to become CDD practitioners. So it's just professionals who are like, okay, well, I really want to put this into my life. I want to
mm,
put this into my work. And so I have all sorts of people that join that. And that's where people just either want to sort of combine that with relationship based training, or they want to completely take training out of the equation and just go a completely organic route. So it's in the process at the moment. I'm taking on people on a mentorship level for that while I build the course. But yeah, that's because the goal is to have more CDD practitioners, to have more
mm,
people teaching this kind of way for professionals. Because I think, yes, it's so important for guardians who want to do this to learn, it as well. But it also has to go top down. I think it
mm,
also has to come from professionals who are now, removed of the pressure that they were going through.
mm,
More people that were like us, who were trying to fit into a shape that just didn't work for us.
mm,
And I think there's so many more out there that feel the same way, and so it's embracing that part of it. So I have the courses and I have the books as well, and I do work one to one, but that I don't actually work one to one all that much anymore, because as you know, running courses, doing all that kind of stuff, you put everything into it, and I
mm.
want to reach as many people as possible. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I will share the links and I'll share your books and things with this. Um, I could talk to you all day.
Same.
You were actually recommended to me. I ran a webinar on I think it was scent work for optimism because I really, really like scent work. I like the way it gives the dog control and agency and using all of their natural behaviors and dog-led scent work for me is amazing.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but this, I can't remember, I think, is he called Tommy? Someone on your course? Or
Probably
he's been
Scotty.
on Scotty,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. He's been on your course. And I did this webinar and he came along to me after the webinar and he said, "You'd really like Bethany." She reminded me, your stuff reminded me of her stuff. And so I messaged him yesterday and I said that we were doing this and he
Oh,
joined the
brilliant.
community. But he is like a huge fan of yours. He loves you.
Yeah.
I'm on the Canine Behaviour College level 6,
Oh, lovely.
learn, and he's on
Yeah.
that as well. And he
Oh,
told me
fantastic.
that he did your course just to make sure that he stayed grounded in not just teaching for food. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
well done, you.
Thank you. Yeah, Scotty's absolutely. He's been an incredible student. Like he's a student on my course, so he's been incredible. Like he, it just really, really, he got it straight away. And yeah, he's great because he goes around and he talks to anyone about it. So you know, he's been
Yeah.
fantastic.
Good.
But yeah, it's nice because it's nice to see other people feel that same passion that I felt
Mm,
because at one point felt a little bit lonely, because I was stepping outside the conventional circle, and that was really hard because people were like, what are you
mm,
doing? You're crazy, what are you doing? And so I had to really start everything again. So meeting people that get it, it is just so lovely because yeah, I felt quite lonely for a while, but now I think
mm.
there are so many more people now that are getting it and like, oh, okay, I get this mindset, I love it. Let's work together, and that's something I love to do, is work together, because I don't think we're meant to be doing things on our own. We are a social species as much as dogs are, and so we like to do things together, and so it's nice to build that community, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and go you, because it's people like you that have stepped outside of the mold, taken the loneliness, taken the risks to income as well, which can be really scary, taken the risk of being socially rejected, and stood there and said, I believe in this. I believe in this. And so you are amazing.
Well,
Really
thank you
own
very
that.
much.
Own that.
I will do, but it wouldn't be fair to not say that you were a huge part of that. Even though you didn't know it at the time, I read your books and I was inspired by the journey that you took, and the willingness that you showed in your books to just step away, and that immediately is what drew you as quite different to all the other books that I'd read,
Mm.
and that was really the inspiration, to make me feel that I could do that too, and actually that you took that step, and it was so inspiring to me that it did help to lead me to take that step as well. So it's not
No.
fair to just say it's me, it was you as well, definitely.
And that's what it's about, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
we collaborate, we build each other up. That's what we should be doing.
absolutely.
Because a lot of the behaviors that we see that we don't like from people towards dogs are trauma-born behaviors. And trauma-born behaviors occur because people feel on their own and scared. And if
Yes,
we can show people that they are seen for who they are and they have a right to follow their heart, we help them and we help dogs. So,
absolutely. I think
yeah,
that's beautiful. That really is
yeah.
beautiful.
I'm going to let you go because you're a busy lady and I appreciate you spending the time with me today. Do you have any questions at all or anything else you would like to share?
No, I think we covered so much, and it's been such a pleasure. I'd love to do this again. I'd love to support what you do, and I love the fact that you're building a community on school. I think that that's a wonderful thing. So I will continue to try and support that in any way I can,
No,
because I
thank
love
you.
what you do. And so yeah, more collaboration and more building each other up, and that can be our message. But yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on here.